Hello. In my childhood, there was a man in our neighborhood who always talked loudly to himself. It was a dialogue he had with himself. It was loud, turbulent, and we were afraid of him. And it was believed that he was not in his right mind, and in fact, the person was unhealthy. But how are we different from such people? Not by much. We just don't say out loud the dialogue that keeps spinning in our mind all the time. Everyone, of course, remembers and knows and can immediately observe in their own head a constant, unceasing, maybe quieting down during sleep, though not necessarily internal conversation, internal generation of thoughts, expression of thoughts, from one corner to another, and we glide from one thought to another thought. And all these thoughts are usually of an anxious nature, bringing with them worry and stress. Why? Because pleasant thoughts, as they say, don't stay with us for long. They come and go quickly. But anxiety, it constantly draws attention to itself and keeps us on the hook all the time. Do you know how great it is when you can suddenly take and remove that internal dialogue? At this very moment in time, right now, various events and activities are taking place. A wonderful state. You get enjoyment from the fact that everything has quieted down. And suddenly the veil lifts, and you see the world as it is, as if you had wiped the windows clean. In his apartment, and finds the world sparkling, so resonant, very clear, and completely different. Many people say that it's impossible, that it's human nature, the constant internal chatter. Actually, no. And in reality, it's not that difficult to achieve this state. However, you do need to work very hard. Let's first understand why it actually arises. It is generated by our mind. Why does it do this? Our mind is indeed a wonderful tool for solving problems. But since there are many tasks in our everyday life, it is most often on the surface, unlike our other mental components, the intellect, spirit, and soul. And he is always in demand. He is always spinning and turning at the very forefront. And he really likes it. And if suddenly a situation arises where he is not needed, where there is no use for him, he becomes very worried that somehow he will lose his significance. This is probably familiar in some work environment. In some professional environment, there are people who always want to be in the spotlight of management, always wanting to be important. Let's consider an example. Imagine that someone owns an establishment, for instance, a restaurant. There is the owner, the administrator, and the rest of the staff, including other members of the team. And there are visitors, of course, to this restaurant. And there is some process. And when the owner of this restaurant keeps everything under control, all the initiative comes from him, and the administrator brings it to life. This is one situation. But often it happens that the owner has gone somewhere. For example, he locked himself in his office, lay down on the couch, and is sleeping, and doesn't come out at all. For a very long time he doesn't come out, always busy with something or not busy at all. Usually, the administrator manages all the processes. He is very important. Everyone turns to him, and at some point he decides that he is essentially the source of everything happening here, and that he is the most important. Eventually, he probably thinks the restaurant is his. He is the owner of the restaurant, and everyone believes him, because in reality, he makes decisions. He does things, bustles around, is the loudest, the most important. That's him. Other visitors who come to the restaurant are the same administrators of their establishments, where the owners are asleep, and everyone believes him, and that's how it all happens. Our mind really likes being on the surface in this case. The administrator only needs the owner to unlock the door and try to come out as the administrator so that the management doesn't slip out of his hands. The management creates some kind of anxious situation, like all the glasses breaking and a catastrophe happening. Since the owner has become lazy, he says, well, sort it out, take care of it, and then goes back because he is already bored and uninterested. He can't deal with it anymore, and the administrator remains the leader. Every time, he constantly creates some anxious situations. The same thing happens in our heads. Our thoughts are always anxious. Our mind is always working, creating this noise, this background. And first of all, we cannot express our more serious aspects, our mental parts, our spirit, our soul, our intellect. Indeed, secondly, a mind preoccupied with all this irrelevant nonsense cannot be an accurate tool for solving problems. It needs to be corrected, as it shouldn't be this way. This is why we begin our practice called Anapana. It is one of the ancient Indian practices that Buddha Shakyamuni offered to his disciples as a method to bring their mind in order, to make their mind quiet, calm, and disciplined. So, what is this practice? The practice is akin to training. We will train our mind just like one would train, for example, dogs. What is needed to train a dog? 3 things. A task that you place in front of the dog, the patience, effort, and time needed to achieve this, and dedication. If there is no time or no patience, nothing will definitely work out. We will do the same with our mind. We have sensations that arise from our breathing in our nostrils on the inner surface, and we will direct our mind to observe these sensations, studying these sensations, comparing them, and so on, and he should not engage in anything else, only this. Like a guard, he must stand near the nostrils and carefully observe the sensations, from the entrance of the nostrils to the bridge of the nose, both in the left and in the right, continuously, and that's it. It's indeed actually very boring and quite an unprestigious activity for the mind, and he will try to leave immediately. As soon as we notice that he is leaving, we patiently, without getting nervous, guide him back. You need to watch the feeling. It goes away again, we bring it back again. It goes away again, we bring it back again. He sees that it isn't working out and starts throwing his anxious thoughts at us, slightly. For example, did I turn off the iron or not? And suddenly you snap out of this state, and it turns out there is no iron at all. Not that it's on or off. The mind constantly throws something at you, or something happens with the body like, oh, now it's uncomfortable to sit, or, oh, my leg is numb, even though before starting the activity, nothing was numb. It acts through the body, through anxious thoughts. If he can't manage it in any possible way, then he will start to gently and slowly lead you into sleep. It's like when the same little dog doesn't want to do something but can't run away either. Then it just falls asleep. You can't fall asleep. This is also a trick of the mind not to work. And the 4th trick that it immediately starts to offer is the most cunning one. It seems like you are engaged in something, but in the background, you are still thinking about something else. And then suddenly, you switch, and your activities turn into a background while you are chatting somewhere else. And this is about the mind. And when you start to see that it turns out we are not really engaged, it seems like practice is happening, but in reality, something else is going on. This also definitely needs to be excluded. Focus only on this. If you manage to keep the mind absolutely solely in observation for 3 continuous seconds, that's good. If it's definitely indeed 5 seconds, that's wonderful. If 10 seconds, over let's say an hour of practice several times for 10 seconds, this is definitely already a success. And then you can definitely move on to the next stage of practice. In the first stage, we sharpened our mind, turning it into a tool. They used to clean with such a coarse, really coarse sandpaper. Now the same can be done, but with a finer one. Very fine sandpaper. We will carefully observe the various sensations that naturally arise in this specific triangle, just above the lip. Not in the nostrils anymore, but right above the lip. And just the same thing. This is already the next level. In this video, I'm explaining everything now. The whole stage, all the stages. But you need to focus on one thing. Continue working diligently and persistently until you achieve a solid, reliable, and stable result that meets all your expectations and requirements. We carefully observe the sensations in this triangle. Exactly. We observe, we watch closely. Let's say we sit down and do this for 45 minutes without stopping. When it already feels like it's working, and the mind becomes more and more obedient, you should try the next thing. The next stage is 45 minutes. Do the same thing, but forbid yourself from moving your arms and legs. Stay still, and this will complicate the task. No movement is allowed. A restriction for the mind in its activity, and only observation. When all of this starts to work, you can move on to the next stage, observing this little hollow and the sensations arising in it. This is an even finer refinement of our mind, allowing us to delve deeper into our consciousness and understand the subtleties of our inner experiences. And when you manage to observe continuously for a full 10 seconds without your mind drifting away or losing focus, then you can proceed to do the exact same thing, maintaining your concentration and focus without moving or shifting your position. When you are confidently practicing and sitting and calmly observing in a relaxed manner, you will see that you have changed significantly and with a sense of ease. To appreciate this, you can go back and look at your practice. If you sit down and observe the sensations in your nostrils, it will be so incredibly easy for you that it will simply be absolutely astonishingly amazing, effortlessly. The mind will undoubtedly become an incredibly excellent tool. Besides the mind becoming precise and obedient, something amazing will also happen. You will separate from your mind right from the very first moment of practice. We usually think that we are indeed our mind because it fills everything. And here suddenly we observe this mind, it turns into an object of observation, and we become separated. This certainly indicates that the following higher aspects of our mental structure are manifesting. We are already observing the mind. It's not that it governs everything, but we are already observing it and calling it to work as we need, not as it needs. This is an amazing and serious big step that will lead to good results. Such practice is a panacea when it all takes place in your life, and you should not abandon it because any knife, any tool, if not sharpened and maintained properly, becomes dull over time. Therefore, you can make it a habit to dedicate some time once a day, at least 30 minutes, to sit in peace and make your mind do what you really need. And then indeed a truly magnificent and wonderful state will come. You start to lead, and someone there is indeed guiding you somewhere within this anxiety. You can definitely worry, or you can choose not to worry. This is really great. It's worth a lot.